All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I am sure other people will join us this morning, but welcome. This is our second annual Collaborative Conservation Funding Forum, and we appreciate you all having some flexibility to stay safe this morning and off the roads. So my name is Paula Jasinski. I'm the coordinator for the Delmarva Land and Litter Collaborative, or DLLC. We appreciate everyone showing up here and weighing in on some of the survey questions we had in advance and participating in the forum today. I hope everybody is staying safe and dry, and we're glad that you're not out there trying to drive to Chesapeake College today. Thank you for bringing your collaborative spirit here today and listening to the upcoming presentations. We have a range of speakers that are still joining us. And so the forum is designed to spur some new ideas, raise awareness about projects that are happening in our backyards and from people across the watershed. Some of them you'll probably want to collaborate with if you aren't already. Some of them may inspire you to design your own projects. So you'll note the agenda was mailed to you, but I've also put it in the chat. Maybe Michelle, if you can put it in there. I know some people have joined since I put it in there. So if you could just copy and paste that link so everyone could see it, that would be great. Some of our forum goals had to change when we changed to being online, and we recognize that a virtual meeting can only take some of the place of an in-person forum. And so you'll still hear from many of the experts that we had planned to have about federal funding forecast and strategies, and be introduced to potential new partners and connections with different communities, and hopefully even begin some new project ideas of your own after hearing from some of the funders and some of the case studies. As we get started, I want to recognize that this forum was put together by the DLLC Planning Committee. And so this wouldn't be possible without all of their help. We have Nancy Nunn, who I believe is on. I think everybody from the Planning Committee is on. She's with the Hughes Agroecology Center. Bob Frazee Strategic Consulting, and the DLLC Vice Chair. Kristen Hughes Evans with Sustainable Chesapeake and a past DLLC chair. We have Kevin Klein, who's a water inspector for DEQ, Virginia DEQ in the Tidewater Regional Office. Natasha Rathliff with Sustainable Chesapeake. I'm not sure Danielle Bauer could join us today, but she's with the Delaware and Maryland Soybean Boards and the Atlantic Soybean Council. We also have Michelle Droston, who's the DLLC program specialist with us. So thank you for everybody on the planning committee who's made this possible and pulled this event together. I'd like everybody here to take a second and put their name, affiliation, and their role in the chat, if you could, just to start the introductions around. We're recording today's session, so we can refer to this in the future, and it should be available on our Delmarva Land and Litter.net website by Thursday of this week. Just a few housekeeping rules as we get started too. After you put your name in the chat, please mute yourselves, turn off your cameras while the speakers are presenting. That'll help us all reduce distractions as we're probably all, or many of us are working from home today. And each of the sessions will be timed, but they will include a Q&A session. So we want to hear from you then, and you can put your questions in the chat, your comments, whatever, and we can either read them, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we will try to call on people as well. We are going to try and stay very much on schedule today because we know everybody's very busy, and we're going to try to end right around noon. If not, maybe a little bit before, depends on how our timing goes. And then as you all are introducing yourselves, I wanted to take a second and review some of the questions and the answers that we got through the registration survey, so you know sort of who's here. We had 74 people registered, representing 49 different organizations. And when we asked about experience in developing projects, you'll see that there is a range. So I think some people might be surprised that 16% are just getting started of those, because I look around this group and I think everybody seems to be very experienced, but 16% self-assigned as they're pretty new at this. 28% very experienced, and then the majority are somewhat experienced. So I think that's really helpful to know that not everybody here is an expert. This should be an open space asking questions, because there are a lot of people that are still learning the process. And then in terms of the interest of where people want to spend their time and focus, the agricultural project development was the first choice of over half of the respondents. And then the second choice was habitat wetlands. So you can see there's a very strong interest in both of those and sometimes combined. And then the third most popular was the capacity building, which is probably not a surprise for any of us. But thank you all for responding to that. Any questions before I move on from those? All right, I am not seeing any. So with that, I would like to introduce our first panel this morning. And we're it's a different kind of forecast than we've all been focused on over the last week or so. This one is looking at the federal funding forecast and some of the strategies as we move forward. So today we have Annabelle Harvey. Annabelle has worked around the state of Maryland for much of her life, including administering the Rural Legacy Program for the Patuxent Tidewater Land Trust, interning with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, and coordinating the Bay Program's Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee before she moved over to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, where she closely follows federal regulations and legislations that impact the Chesapeake Bay. So we're lucky to hear from her. She is also joined by Jen Nelson. Jen is the director of Maryland and Delaware's Association of Conservation Districts, and she started her own company, Resource Smart, in 2013 to focus on projects that support Delmarva and Mid-Atlantic farmers and that improve the economic and environmental sustainability of their farms. Before launching that, she was the ag conservation planner with the Sussex County Conservation District, and she looks for opportunities for water quality improvements that engage farmers and include them in the solutions. So thank you both. This time I'm going to turn it over to Annabelle, and you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great. All right. Thanks for the introduction. As Paula said, I'm Annabelle. I'm the Federal Policy Coordinator with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. This is going to be a pretty broad overview of what we're expecting to see over the next 4 years with Congress, as well as the next administration. Since this is broad, if you have any questions or want to talk more about what we're expecting, feel free to follow up with me afterwards. Otherwise, we will get started. Just wanted to give a quick introduction to what our new watershed congressional district map now looks like. We have 16 new representatives between the House and the Senate across the watershed. So lots of new faces, lots of new opportunities to make connections and tell our new representatives all the great work that's going on across the watershed. While they are new to the federal level, they may not be new to you. We are seeing a lot of folks that are coming up from state legislative offices, county level positions, local government. So as you look across this list of folks, you see familiar names. Keep that in mind as we get to the last slide where we talk about some other things we can do to impact funding over the next 4 years.
Is it Will? Oh, that's our trash man? No, is that our trash guy?
Could everybody mute themselves? We're getting some feedback about trash. Thanks.
Okay, great. So again, a quick overview of appropriations, which is the process that Congress goes through to come up with our federal budget for every fiscal year. You'll see this great graph to the left that shows that there is a set appropriations process with due dates, timelines, and just want to put it out there that, it has not followed that process in a really long time. The, likelihood that Congress passes a fiscal year 12 appropriations bills package on time and funds us through a full fiscal year has gotten pretty low. We don't really expect to see that very often. So while FY25 started should start October 1st, did start October 1st, we have not seen a full fiscal year 25 package. Congress passed a continuing resolution right before the holiday break, and that funds the government through March 14th. I will also note that CR package included an extension of the Farm Bill which I know we'll get into with the next panelist. But so we are still working through fiscal year 25 funding asks. We are still talking with Congress about that, even though we are now moving also into talking to them about fiscal year 26. So the fiscal year at the federal level runs from October 1st to September 30th. And the timetable, like I said, they don't usually follow it, but we will expect to see the Trump administration's proposal for what they think the federal budget should look like by February-ish. It can be as late as March or April, and Congress will start working through that along with working with folks like us, telling them what we hope to see. They'll start that around March, and we'll be advocating with them through whenever they're able to pass that fiscal year budget. So typically we're working with them March through September, talking about our priorities and all the success stories of federal grant programs that we want to see included in the next fiscal year budget. So in terms of things we talk to Congress about as priority, as conservationists, people working in ag, things that you all might want to keep an eye on. The first funding package bill is ag and FDA. So that includes the USDA, and there are a few programs that we want to make sure are included and funded fully. One is the USDA Chesapeake Bay States Partnership Initiative, which has a fun acronym, CSPI. This was first seen in 2022. There were some leftover funds from FY22 that they were able to roll over into this new program. It was $22.5 million of unspent FY21 funds that were then funneled directly to Chesapeake Bay ag conservation programs. So EQIP got 10 million, Conservation Stewardship Program got 2.5 million, and ASEP got 10 million. Since this was made from just leftover FY21 funds, we are now trying to get it authorized as a continuing program that has the opportunity to be funded every year through the appropriations process. Obviously, advocacy includes just talking about all the need for continued technical and financial support for ag conservation directly to our watershed. And the fact that FY21 funds got funneled directly to the watershed is proof that this is a priority, and we're going to continue advocating for that. And then obviously conservation funding, just giving the max amount authorized through the Farm Bill, which is a challenge considering we haven't seen a new Farm Bill, but as for now, just advocating for the 2018 levels. Another important approach bill is the Interior Environment Bill. So this includes all of EPA. So this is a big one, obviously, for the Chesapeake Bay. We have a geographic program, the Chesapeake Bay program, and all of the grants underneath that. So EPA Chesapeake Bay program in FY24 was funded at 92 million. And most of that money is going to these grant programs that get funneled directly to localities and gets a lot of really great on the ground projects, as I'm sure you all know, on the ground. In terms of our expectations, I know, again, these are our best estimated guesses based on what the last Trump administration did with the budget, as well as some campaign promises, what we've talked to some congressional champions about. We did see that the last Trump administration nearly zeroed out the budget a couple of times. One time he reduced it by 30%. So every year in the president's proposed federal budget, the administration has an opportunity to say, this is what I think the funding level should be for all of these line items. And EPA was a pretty big target during the last Trump administration. Luckily, we do have pretty consistent bipartisan support in Congress. Congress are the ones that essentially take that proposal from the president's office and says, great, thanks for this suggestion, but we are not going to zero out the EPA Chesapeake Bay program. We're going to fully fund it. And actually, during the Trump administration, Congress increased funding. So while it might seem really scary as soon as we see the president's budget and maybe things are getting cut down in that, we know that we can work with our congressional champs across the watershed delegation to maintain that funding and really launch us into beyond 2025 at the Bay program. So there are other important programs: the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, Non-Point Source Implementation Grant, Section 319, and the EPA Pollution Control Grants. Again, these were a target during the last Trump administration. Trump administration proposed a total zeroing out of the non-point source implementation grant, Section 319. But Congress, again, was able to restore funding during their appropriations process. As you can see in the graph, funding overall has been reduced in the past 20-ish years and only been slightly boosted during the last administration. As you all know, these grants are critical to bring together state and local efforts with federal funding leadership to implement non-point source pollution reduction projects. So this is going to be a continuing priority for CBF, our partners. Hopefully all of you can help with that. As I'll talk about in the last slide, a lot of our discussions with Congress and the reason that it's such a bipartisan effort to make sure these stay funded is that it matters to the local organizations, to their producers in their district. It matters to those people, and the stories and the success stories of the people in their districts are really what is impactful to them. So hearing just from, CBF isn't as powerful as them hearing from the folks like you working on the ground and, seeing the impact of these programs in their districts. So talk a little bit more about that in a second. I also want to flag, so like I said, next panelist will talk more about the Farm Bill. So this will be a very quick flag that CBF, Choose Clean Water Coalition, and the Bay Commission worked together on a Chesapeake Bay Farm Bill marker bill. So this was just a package of priorities that we were hoping to get pushed into the new Farm Bill. I would call it the 2023 Farm Bill, but we'll see. Maybe 2025 is our year. But the bill is called the Chesapeake Bay Conservation Acceleration Act, and it has 5 priorities that you see on the screen. I'm not going to dive into them, but if you're interested in hearing more, we're expecting to reintroduce this in the new Congress. So it was introduced in the 118th, and we hope to reintroduce it. So as they're working on drafting a new farm bill, they have this package of our priorities that they could put into it. Okay, finally is your impact. Like I said, with all of those funding priorities, when we go and meet with Congress, the best tool we have are stories from producers, from farmers, from funders, from people on the ground helping implement conservation programs, telling their stories, saying, I'm in your district, I implemented this program using this federal funding mechanism. Let's protect it so we can continue doing this great work. Here's the impact it had. So if you are someone who has used federal funding, get in contact with your local elected official, your state elected official, and of course, your federal elected official. It's really easy to contact them. You can call them, you can leave a voicemail. If you're interested in meeting with them in person, CBF is happy to help facilitate that. And if you're not interested in meeting with your elected official, the next best thing, share your success stories, whether that's on a blog and you share it widely and send it to your elected official that way. Get in contact with partners. There are tons of partners in the Chesapeake Bay watershed that meet regularly with Congress and congressional staff. And we're more than happy to take your success stories on these federal grant programs and share that with the rep from your district. Obviously, you're all here, so you know the importance of working with partners and within coalitions, but that's the best way to bolster messaging. We do lobby days. We can provide resources for you to tell them all the great work that you're doing. So as we get through the appropriations process, Congress is really our best tool, and our congressional reps in the watershed are typically very supportive. It's a very bipartisan effort. We see a lot of bipartisan sponsoring and co-sponsoring on Chesapeake Bay ag conservation related bills. So I guess I will leave you with, even if we see some scary things coming out with our priorities, Chesapeake Bay conservation wise, that we'll be working across the next year and the next 4 years with Congress. And we have a lot of support, just like we did last time. So with that, I will pass it on.
Thank you, Annabelle. So next up will be Jen Nelson, and we're gonna save questions until after Jen is done, and then we'll have about 10 minutes for that. But please, add them to the chat if you have anything that you'd like to ask the speakers.
Okay, so I will try to share my screen here. Okay. And then get into presentation mode. Okay, so did that work? Are you guys looking at a presentation?
We see your notes now.
Okay, wrong screen, technical difficulties. Let me try the other one. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Stopping. And share screen 2, which is where this will pop up, I guess, from my last experience. Okay, how about that?
It's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Annabelle did a really good job of outlining the appropriations process and why I have kind of flagged 2 big themes for a federal funding forecast with big investments and definitely big uncertainty with the incoming administration and kind of that environment of partisanship that we see. And I'm going to drill down into 3 specific elements within that federal budget. So the Farm Bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and I'm going to touch just a little bit on the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities. Okay, so the Farm Bill was last passed in 2018. It's supposed to be renewed every 5 years. It's been extended a couple of times now so far, including the end of last year. It generally enjoys bipartisan support, especially for the conservation title. And with the versions that we have out there now, we're looking at about a $662 billion investment nationwide over the next 5 years. And conservation makes up about 7% of the total Farm Bill budget, so a pretty small portion really. And that math works out to about $46 billion over the next 5 years. Okay. Now I'm going to take a look at the Farm Bill as it was from 18 to 23, and just in Delaware and Maryland. So you can see here, this includes our working lands program, so the Environmental Quality Incentives Program and Conservation Stewardship Program. It also involves, I included easement programs, as well as conservation technical assistance. So all of those put together, you can see we're usually at about $45 to $50 million between Delaware and Maryland statewide. And then 23 saw a bump, especially in that agricultural conservation easement program and conservation technical assistance. So you saw that start to come up, and that's fueled mostly by those 2 pots. Okay, so I want you to keep that number in mind, that we're at about $45 to $50 million between those 2 states in an average year. Okay. So when we introduced the Inflation Reduction Act in 22, that's a $19.5 billion investment nationwide for practices that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really focused on practices. There's a lot of overlap with the kind of practices that we usually do. But the way that funding is structured is it ramps up from 23 more in 24. You can see in 25, $34 million allocated between the 2 states. That keeps going into 26 and 27, and then it falls off, and the money has to be expended by fiscal year 30. So what we were looking at, we saw a small increase in 23. We saw a big increase in 24, $26 million, and a projected budget of $34 million. So if we're looking at $45 to $50 million in an average year, and then you add $34 million on top of that, and continuing to increase in 26 and 27, we're just about doubling the budgets that we usually have to work with in conservation funding. So it's a significant increase and a significant workload that goes along with that. Okay. And just really quick, I don't want to spend too much time on the partnerships for climate smart commodities, but it was a one-time investment of about $3 billion with 141 projects selected nationwide. And the reason that I want to talk about it, it's not under the NRCS umbrella, it's under USDA as a whole. And it was kind of put out there without a whole lot of guardrails or shape, because it was trying to spur innovation. And so there's some overlap with the typical work that we do at the conservation districts and with NRCS in providing technical and financial assistance. It also looks at piloting new methods for quantification and monitoring and developing markets. Okay, so there are 26 projects that are available to Delaware and Maryland farmers. They're not specific to those two states that total nearly $800 million. And my point in listing all of the partners here is that there are about half that I'm familiar with or have worked with, and half that are kind of off my radar up until this point, that are out there potentially working with farmers, and just it makes it a little bit difficult to coordinate and kind of understand how everybody fits together with all of these moving pieces. But I do expect that there's some exciting and innovative work to come out of that as well. Okay, now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the farm and agricultural economy. So this is what it looks like from a farmer's point of view. Okay, so over the past couple of years, farmers have seen a pretty significant decrease in their net farm income from a high in 2022. And you can see, looking at the graph, just how volatile farm income is year over year. So we're looking at a forecast that's really looking at an agricultural recession. So there's few signs of immediate relief according to the American Farm Bureau, and farmers are navigating pretty tight margins right now. All right, so this is a nationwide picture. And now I want to look at Delmarva specifically, where we had a pretty tough year weather-wise. So we started out with near record precipitation, and then we dried out and had near or record low precipitation towards the end of the year. So yields were pretty variable, and in a lot of areas on Delmarva, very poor, kind of on top, sandwiched on top or layered on top of that challenging farm economy that we were already having to begin with. Okay, and that's important when we come back to looking at the Farm Bill and conservation, because that's an environment that's tough to work in, it's tough to do business in, and it's tough to manage and prioritize conservation in that environment. Okay, so going back to the Farm Bill, we have some consequences of extending the Farm Bill. So some farmers are subject to program funding caps, say within the EQIP program. And if they've implemented big projects in the past 5 years, they've hit those funding caps and they don't renew until we pass a new Farm Bill. Okay, so that's starting to affect a number of farmers. And then also the IRA funding is separate from the Farm Bill. And I know a lot of conservation groups were hoping that funding would get rolled into the Farm Bill itself instead of being kind of off on the side. Because in the case that the Inflation Reduction Act were repealed, the remaining 14 billion funds that are in that fund would go away. Okay, so Annabelle also talked about partisanship and the incoming administration. So we do have a lot of uncertainty there. Shutdowns interrupt a lot of things, but they also interrupt the delivery of technical and financial assistance. It takes time away just to close down and open up an office, even if it's a short shutdown. And then the incoming administration has also, besides the budget specifically, has proposed tariffs, which can definitely affect the agricultural economy, and other changes that can affect budgets and the availability of labor to farms. So, and then David Baird makes this point with the Sussex district, he'll be on later, that I think is a really good one to point out that the financial assistance that's available for Farm Bill programs is cost share. So the Farm Bill programs, those conservation programs, are intended to fund maybe 50, 75% in some cases of the overall cost of a practice. But the remainder of that project is intended to be funded by the farmer or the landowner. And so when we're looking at these huge investments in conservation, you have to ask, especially in this environment with the tight margins and a rough economy, if those matching funds are there to make those projects work. Okay. And last, we don't have a new Farm Bill, but both the House and Senate have released their draft versions of a Farm Bill, and these are some of the highlights that we've seen there. So we're looking at increased mandatory funding for programs, including EQIP, CSP, and things like that. We're looking at an increased focus on precision ag in EQIP and CSP. One version has introduced a forest conservation easement program, which I think is pretty cool. A larger focus on small and diversified producers, so making new programs and expanding the breadth of programs that are available to all kinds of farmers. An increased climate focus in RCPP and CSP. And finally, addressing solar energy on farmland. So researching some of the impacts of those projects and looking at where they can be best placed on the landscape. So some of those are some of the things that we're seeing potentially coming in the new Farm Bill, which hopefully will get passed this next year. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you, Annabelle. There are a couple of questions already in the chat, so keep those coming. Alec asked the question, what are you, and I think this is the grand you for lots of people here, but what are you specifically doing to build strong relationships with the new majorities on both the House and Senate sides?
I can answer as succinctly as I can. So first of all, obviously just going up to the Hill and popping into offices, introducing ourselves and saying we're a resource for you, especially with the newer members. They have staff that are hopping onto new portfolios. So those on environmental ag portfolios, they're more than happy to hear from people who have fact sheets, resources, and the data reports pulled together for them. Generally, when we work with Republican offices in the watershed, which we have good relationships with, we think a lot of Representative Whitman from Virginia, Representative Kiggins from Virginia, they're huge Bay champions. We tend to just focus on maybe different data than what we might use for other offices. So the economic impact, and especially they care a lot about the farming community. So those types of conversation points may be more effective in working with them than just the overall conservation value of these programs. And so that has been very successful. Also, as committee assignments start to come out and committee leadership starts to come out, we know the Senate side, we know a lot of the House side, but working with committee leadership, again, just being a resource for them, keeping up with them, meeting with them regularly, has been pretty successful. And like I said, in the watershed, especially, it is a bipartisan effort across the board for bay restoration. People's constituents care about it. So another great one is we have done in-district farmer lobby days. So we bring farmers. We met with Representative G.T. Thompson, who was the House Ag Committee during the last congressional session, and we'll do things like that again, where we're bringing their constituents out. They're not just hearing from conservation organization, and talking about the success of those programs and the impact they have on farms in their district with their constituents. Those types of things are, I think, the most impactful, and we hope to really ramp that up in the 119th Congress.
Alec, I see you flagged that funding caps were actually raised as part of the CR, which I appreciate. So that wasn't something that I had seen when I was trying to look up information. And so with the conservation districts to build relationships. We have a National Association of Conservation Districts that does a lot of work at the federal level. And then we also, I don't think that we're going to change up how we work with the House and Senate. Unfortunately, we don't have representatives, at least so far, on the ag committees in Delaware or Maryland. But what we've done, is visits to DC to meet with elected officials, and then kind of continue those relationships at home. So, where people have staffers that work locally, we're always inviting people out into the field to meet with farmers, to see when we have field days and things like that, so that we have kind of multiple touch points throughout the year to build relationships and keep those things going. So that's what we've done before. I think that's what we're going to continue doing now with the new members that are in, but just kind of making sure that we have those open lines of communication, and that we are bringing them out into the field to make sure that they see what what goes on. I think the point about success stories was a really good one there too. So, and then Andy Harris is the chair of Ag Appropriations Subcommittee. So he's actually one that does meet with us in person. He does not have us meet with staffers, which is he can be a challenge, but he is sort of open to meeting with us in person and talking face to face, which is great.
Thank you both. Mark Hoffman just posted a question. What's the status of the federal CREP funding in Maryland? I'm aware of a project on hold due to the lack of current funding.
I'm not familiar with that issue. I would have to come back and follow up.
If anybody else happens to have insight, please feel free to share that in the chat. All right. Are there any other questions for the speakers? There was a question about whether or not we'll be providing copies of the slides that you all presented today and some of the other speakers that will follow. We can work with each of the speakers to make sure that they're comfortable with that, but we are recording today's session, and that will definitely be up on the delmarvalandandlitter.net website later this week, probably by Thursday. So as long as speakers are okay, we can share those, but at least you can go back and look at the recording. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we can thank you both for sharing your experiences today. That was very helpful. I appreciate it. I'm going to hand it over to the next facilitator. I'm going to make him a spotlight too. So Bob Frazie's up next with the funder panel. So.
Okay, thanks, Paula. Quick sound check. How am I coming through?
You sound great.
Okay, good. So next we have a panel of funders from 3 groups that have programs and provide funds that support our work. We're going to hear an overview from them and get some insight on navigating the funding process. Just as a matter of format, each of the presenters will be speaking for 10 minutes. And as Paula has said before, we'll post our questions in the chat and come up to those at the end. And in the spirit of football playoff season, I will give a 2-minute warning or inject at 2 minutes to remind the funders of our time constraints. And so that will be our format and our process for today. So with that, let me introduce our funding panel. We so much appreciate them being with us. First, Sherry DeGraffenreid is the NRCS Assistant State Conservationist for Programs in Maryland. And through NRCS, program managers though they're different each state, Sherry has graciously agreed to represent her colleagues today to provide information on what's available regionally. And Aaron Lewis is the director of a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Delaware River Program. The Delaware River Program is dedicated to restoring the fish and wildlife habitats and water quality of the Delaware River and its tributaries. And then also from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Jake Riley, he's with the Chesapeake Bay program. The Chesapeake Bay Stewardship Fund has grant programs dedicated to protecting and restoring the bay. And finally, Whitney Vong is a program officer at the Chesapeake Bay Trust. And the Bay Trust is a nonprofit grant-making organization created in 1985 by the Maryland General Assembly. And it's dedicated to improving the watersheds of the Chesapeake Bay, the Maryland coastal bays, and the Youghiogheny River. So with those introductions, we'll kick off our panel. Sherry, would you like to go first?
Sure, that'll be great. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to share the programs that we have available this year. I currently serve as the Assistant State Con for Programs for Maryland. We do a lot of work between Maryland and Delaware. So while the funding and how it may be administered may be a little bit different between the two states, but these both states have these funding opportunities available. I will be giving, of course, from the Maryland side, what we have and the numbers from the Maryland side. So let me try to share my screen here with everyone. Okay, let me know when you can see.
We can see it great. Thanks, Sherry.
Okay, thank you. So here I would just like to get started here with just talking about this will cover the 2025 conservation funding opportunities offered in Maryland. And if you have questions about anything else, please feel free. If I don't have the answer, I will make an attempt to find out for you. Thank you. So Maryland conservation funding for EQIP, that's what we're going to start with first. For 2025, in just our general EQIP fund, and I have it broken out in the different funding pools, we have 9 million.
Sherry, I'm
yes.
sorry. If you advance your slide, we still see the title.
Oh, I thought I did. It didn't. Okay. Put it up. Okay, it's not. Why is it not wanting to go in preset mode? Oh.
We can try to share it on our end. Michelle, do you have hers available?
Yeah, let me pull it up.
I'm sorry, and I don't know, it's my computer.
That's all right. We are all rolling with the punches today and the the brave new online forum.
All right, just a minute. I feel like I'm under pressure. I find the share. Right. Do you see it?
Yeah, I just put it in presentation mode and go to the second slide though.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, see slideshow at the top.
Did that work?
No, but we can see the slide. We just see all of them on the left.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, in the interest of time, maybe, Sherry, do you want to just go through this? Oh,
I'll try again.
Yeah, if we're not happy, if we can't get it to show, I'm happy to go through it and you can share my PowerPoint for anyone that needs it.
Sure. All right.
You see it now?
It says loading.
Oh,
I can just go ahead and talk through it and
That would be great, Sherry, and we'll continue working in the background.
okay, thank you. So for this year, in Maryland, just our equip um general allocation was $9,141,551. In our initiatives, and these are things like our National Water Quality Initiatives, National Air Quality Initiatives, the Golden Wing Warbler, and our Organic Transition Initiative. We received $2,040,359. And EQIP IRA, that's the Inflation Reduction Act money that you just heard Ms. Jen talk about. We received $18,694,019 for a total of $29,875,929 that will be available for EQIP funding. And this is an estimated number and is subject to change based on funding availability. And this is what we have received in the initial allocation. Now, remember, just like we said, we don't have a full fund bill, so we do not have our full allocation numbers as of yet. The next thing we have is Maryland Conservation Funding and EQIP for FY 2025. So I broke down kind of what we have, where we're offering funding. So we have an EQIP General, we have Act Now. Now, Act Now is a funding mechanism that streams applications. And the goal here is to get from usually application to a contract takes anywhere from 6 months or longer. This was a streamlined process for those individuals that know what they want, have all their paperwork in order and ready to go and know what they need to do for their project. And that's simply because this mechanism the Act Now mechanism is used to try to go from application to a contract in less than 30 days or less. So we're offering CAP plans, SEMAs, and DIAs and high tunnel in that sign up that was offered. EQIP General Classic, we have cropland, wildlife, forestry, grazing, and livestock. We also have funding for beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged. We also have a urban fund pool, oyster restoration, and we have EQIP CIC, conservation incentive contracts, which helps bridge the gap if you're in that weird space. Maybe you've done EQIP 1 or 2 times. You're not quite sure if you're ready to step over to CSP, or you want to see what kind of the nuances of having a CSP contract would look like. This is a great program for you to try, and it has its own payment limitation. So its payment limitation is separate from EQIP and CSP, meaning it will not contribute to either of those payment limitations. So that's also when we had farmers that were dealing with reaching the cap. This was a nice way to be able to still participate in conservation activities and not have to worry about capping out. And then we have, of course, the EQIP initiatives, I'm sorry. And that's the National Water Quality, National Air Quality, Golden Wing Warbler, and Organic Transition Initiative. So the funding for EQIP IRA in 2025, we have EQIP IRA Act Now, and that will be for on-farm energy. We have a cover crop initiative, cropland, grazing, livestock, wildlife, forestry, beginning farmer, and socially disadvantaged. And for IRA Classic, we have cropland, grazing, livestock, wildlife, forestry, beginning farmer, and socially disadvantaged. So Maryland funding for CSP, which is our Conservation Stewardship Program, which is our step up program for those who either already implement in a conservation minded way, or this is how you're choosing to farm. So for CSP, our classic allocation was $2,290,000, and our RA allocation was $1 million. We have already spent over 1.1 million in CSP renewals, and this was for farmers that had previously participated in the last 5 years in the CSP program. Every 5 years, they are offered an opportunity to extend their contracts for another 5 years if they are willing to step up their level of conservation across land uses, addressing additional resource concerns. Let's see here.
Are you trying to advance?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, thanks.
So Maryland, of course, in the Conservation Stewardship Program, in the classic sign up, we have ag land beginning farmer, ag land socially disadvantaged, organic, NIPF beginning farmer, NIPF socially disadvantaged farmer, regular NIPF, and then urban, which is new for Maryland this year. We're doing CSP, we're offering that in the urban setting. And then we have IRA, which is the same thing, ag land beginning farmer, ag land socially disadvantaged, organic, NIPF beginning farmer, NIPF socially disadvantaged farmer, general NIPF, and urban as well. Then we also have the Agricultural Assistance Program, also known as AMA. So in Maryland, our focus for AMA is irrigation. We had an initial allocation of $250,000. So both through AMA and RMA, the decision was made to address irrigation resource concerns in the state of Maryland. We do not have the funding announcement as far as AMA, RMA. We do not know if we will be receiving those funds this year. That is likely going to be tied to budget with the respective agency. So other funding opportunities in Maryland, we have easements. You have the RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and that is where entities or organizations or individuals can essentially partner with NRCS, and they have 2 ways that you can develop. You can go the classic route, which is where you're working kind of in conjunction with NRCS, utilizing our tools and things of that nature. And then we have AFA, which is an alternative funding agreement, in which the partner then will kind of set the parameters. You can negotiate the parameters in which you want to work in, whether that's specific to a watershed, specific to a resource concern, and you can kind of formulate different opportunities. So if there are groups or things like out there like that that have an interest in that, those be on the lookout for those funding opportunities. And we have those both at the state level and national levels. Then we have Conservation Innovation Grant, and the key here is we look for innovative ways to address conservation or resource concern. So that is also something that's open, and you can apply for that whether you're an entity or an individual. And the key here is innovation. And then the non-traditional funding opportunities. And those are just where each, I don't know how, if with Delaware, but I know with Maryland, we have, and most states tend to have non-traditional funding opportunities available. And this is where you'll work with specific states to address things that they have identified as areas of concerns. And these are usually your CIG and your NFOs are going to be based on availability of funds as well.
2 minutes, Sherry.
Okay. So the current signups that we have available right now that are open. So eQuip signup 2 is open till February the 7th, 2025. If people are interested in going into their local offices and signing up in Maryland. And we have eQuip General, Classic, eQuip IRA, eQuip Urban, the initiatives, Oyster Restoration, and RCPP opportunities open at this time. Under CSP, we have Classic and IRA and CSP Urban funding open till February, sign up open till February the 7th as well. So with that, I'm done. Like I said, my name is Sherry DeGraffin Reed. I'm the Assistant State Conservationist of Programs for Maryland. And so feel free to reach out if you have any any questions or concerns about anything. And thank you for your time.
Great. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks for sharing and thanks for being with us this morning. Folks, post your questions in the chat. We'll have a chance to follow up with Sherry at the end of the session. So next, we have Aaron Lewis and Jake Riley from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So I'll hand it off to them to talk about the approach from that organization.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, folks. Y'all can hear me? Thumbs up. Good. Yes, good to see y'all. Happy good morning. I don't know if it was me earlier, or snow day with the kids, so you might have heard some Beauty and the Beast if I wasn't on mute, but appreciate the opportunity to join you here today. So I'll be taking sort of the lion's share of the presentation. I'm Jake Riley. I'm the Director of Chesapeake Programs for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We also have my excellent colleague, Aaron Lewis, who runs our Delaware River programs. We want to be representative of the entire Delmarva. No, certainly that the Chesapeake can eat up a lot of the money and the oxygen, but certainly we know that there's interest across the Delmarva, and we certainly have some folks here. I know David Baird, for example, on the line that have equity on the other side of the watershed boundary. So great to have Aaron here as well. So just a minute to kind of orient folks to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, sort of who we are, what we do. NFWF actually celebrated its 40th anniversary, I believe, last year, created in 1984. As a mechanism to help pool and leverage federal funding for conservation, right? So our basic sort of mechanism is we partner with federal agencies via cooperative agreements, grant agreements, contribution agreements, any number of different vehicles, as well as the private sector. So if that's corporates, if that's other foundations, we serve as that mechanism to basically pool funding, pool resources, and then we deliver those resources generally through competitive grants programs. We have a number of national grants programs that I'll just kind of take a minute at the top to just kind of reference, just because I know that we tend to get some questions. So certainly want to get ahead of any interest on those programs. But really fortunately for you all, we also have 2 landscape scale programs that are really focused on delivering resources and addressing specific issues, both for the Chesapeake Bay watershed and for the Delaware River watershed. So you're in a great position. You don't necessarily have to compete for those national programs. They are opportunities out there. Again, I'll touch on them in a second, but really would encourage you to really think about our Chesapeake and our Delaware programs as sort of a first stop for you. And fortunately on the calendar, those will be the first stop for you coming up here in 2025. So, again, just quick hit on some of our national programs that are out there that may be of interest and relevant here. Conveniently, all 3 of these programs that I'll just mention quickly, they don't currently have RFPs open. They do tend to open later in the spring and summer timeframe. So you've got some time to sort of orient yourself to those programs and think about it. 3 quick programs, right? One is our Conservation Partners Program. This is a program that is primarily funded through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, generally does a lot of the work that y'all are talking about, right? In terms of supporting ag conservation and ag delivery, very specific interest and nexus with those Farm Bill programs and really sort of providing grants to help accelerate enrollment and implementation associated with those programs. That is a national program. So certainly it's an opportunity for you all. But as you can imagine, with a national program, it's highly competitive, right, on a national basis. And that's the same thing with all of these national programs, is they are generally very competitive. And so, again, you all have the opportunity and the benefit of having more regionally focused programs. But conservation partners, that's probably the sweet spot given sort of your general interest. NRCS funded, all about ag conservation work. The two other programs, one is quickly our America the Beautiful Challenge program. I think it's undergoing a little bit of a rebrand currently, but it has been known as our America the Beautiful Challenge program, a program that sort of came about just in the last couple of years with the advent of both BIL, bipartisan infrastructure law, and IRA funding. Large national scale program, relatively larger grant awards. So these are up to several $1 million at a clip. A very, very, very competitive program. There is also an additional sort of flavor for this program really aimed at supporting tribal communities, advancing sort of conservation work in their interests and sort of self-determine there. So certainly know that there's some of that that's happening on the Delmarva. So that's a great development. And in that sense, you know, to the extent that you have tribal partners in some of this work, the America the Beautiful Challenge could be a potential sort of resource for you. And then the last one is our National Coastal Resilience Fund. That program has been around for, I believe, about 6, 7, 8 years now. You know, primarily funded via NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The kind of the flavor there, it's really in the title, is our, you know, National Coastal Resilience Fund, really aimed at supporting coastal resilience projects. This is, again, one of those programs that provides relatively larger awards. There's a number of different sort of funding tracks in that program, but you know, we've seen awards $5, $10 million. The key there with that program is really looking for projects that are implementing natural and nature-based solutions that benefit both sort of fish and wildlife habitat as well as human communities. So certainly important, and given kind of the landscape that you all are in, that NCRF program can be a resource. I know it has been a resource for some work on the Delmarva, so certainly, you know, good for you all to be aware of it. That being said, as I mentioned already, like those are very, very, very competitive programs, right? And that's not to say Aaron and I don't think you should apply to those. I think what we would encourage you to do is come talk to us first, right? Because we have sort of relatively robust funding portfolios in both the Chesapeake Bay watershed and the Delaware. So I'll talk a little bit about the Chesapeake programs, then I'll turn it to Aaron, and then I'll sort of sum it up for us. So our Chesapeake work, we've had sort of a footprint here in the Chesapeake for 25 years now. Most of that through the years has been funded primarily via the Environmental Protection Agency. So through the resources that Annabelle presented on, funding coming through EPA through the Chesapeake Bay Program Office. We also just recently in the last couple of years have expanded some new programs, newly authorized programs from Congress with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we really have kind of 3 primary programs available in Chesapeake world for y'all to be aware of. One is the Innovative Nutrient and Sediment Reduction Grants Program. So again, it's all there in the title. This is a program largely funded by EPA that's really focused on accelerating the delivery of nutrient and sediment load reductions, right? Consistent with the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. So lots of partners on the call here have already benefited from that program in terms of implementing any number of practices. So, you know, precision ag, buffers, wetlands work, soil health, et cetera. The key there with that program is the ability to sort of demonstrate and quantify, you know, nutrient sediment load reductions with those projects, right? That is our sort of largest program in terms of average grant size, for what it's worth. Also, in the last several years, we've really been focusing on leveraging sort of collaborative and partnership-based models in that program to accelerate those load reductions. So that is very much in the spirit of this program and really kind of DLLC, which is nice, right? Is sort of the idea of collaboration, right? Multiple partners sitting around the table, leveraging capacity, skill sets, resources to be able to accelerate that work on the ground. The next 2 programs, so the Innovative program generally has a late summer RFP opening date. We have the solicitation open through the fall, proposals due somewhere just before Thanksgiving. So we've already sort of been through that process for the 2025 funding year back in the fall of 2024. But we will have 2 other RFPs that are open. So the other 2 programs in Chesapeake world generally have spring RFP cycles. The first is our Small Watershed Grants Program. This is one that's actually our longest standing program in the Chesapeake. Again, funded primarily by US EPA. It does support a lot of the water quality work. It also allows us to fund a broader sort of array or portfolio of work consistent with the Chesapeake Bay Program Partnership and the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, right? So water quality is certainly there, but any number of other kind of priority species or habitat goals that have been identified through the partnership, other sort of goals and outcomes that have been embraced by the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement are sort of fully kind of in scope in terms of that small watershed grants program. Somewhat smaller in terms of average grant size. We've got funding caps of $1 million in that program. So $2 million for INSR, $1 million for the small watershed grants program. And then the third program for us now in Chesapeake World, and this is our kind of our third/4th year of really kind of offering it, even funds being available, is this exciting new Chesapeake Wild program. So this is a program that was authorized as part of the 2020 sort of large conservation omnibus at the federal level, primarily funded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, really serves as an awesome kind of complement to the existing Chesapeake programs that we have. So really, really strong emphasis on that species habitat connection, and a broader set of potential species and habitat sort of outcomes and kind of priority species, again, to sort of supplement and complement the awesome base of existing resources and historic programs, you know, that we've had here in the Chesapeake. So the small watershed grants program, Chesapeake Wild program, literally will be opening in the next week or two. So certainly pay attention to our website, nifwif.org/Chesapeake. We anticipate proposals will be due sometime in early April for those programs as well. And I'll touch on, once I let Aaron kind of talk for a couple minutes, touch on like how to access us and whatever, but just wanted to kind of put those basic program kind of pins out there. But I will turn it to Aaron to quickly round us out.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Good morning, everyone. I'm Erin Lewis. I'm the program director for the Delaware program at the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So it's really great to be here today with you all. I'm seeing some familiar names and some new ones. So it's nice to meet you. So as Jake kind of alluded at the top here, just a few weeks from now, we're going to be opening our 2025 Delaware Watershed Conservation Fund request for proposals. So this is kind of the perfect timing for me to be connecting with you all today. But just to give you some background on the program, the Delaware Watershed Conservation Fund, or you're going to hear me referring to it as the DWCF, was launched in 2018 after the Delaware River Basin Conservation Act passed by Congress. So primarily our funding for the DWCF comes from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we manage this program in partnership with them. And kind of as Bob covered really well at the beginning of this as well, the primary goal of the DWCF grants is to restore and conserve natural areas, waterways, and fish and wildlife habitat in the Delaware River watershed. So as I mentioned, we typically open the annual request for proposals in mid to late January. We typically close that in mid to late March. We're currently aiming for the end of January for 2025. And we announce awards in August. This year, we're expecting to have about $14 million to award, and we're expecting grants to range anywhere from $75,000 to $2 million. So as Jake kind of mentioned at the top of this as well, those national programs are really focusing on kind of those big conservation projects, the big construction, and we're kind of the smaller scale, more watershed specific projects, so $75,000 to $2 million. With most of the funding for the program being federal in nature, we do require one-to-one match for most grant applications, but I'll get into more details about that a little bit later. Just to focus on kind of our 4 priorities for the program. So we fund projects under 4 what we call strategic program areas. So the first being any project that sustains and enhances fish and wildlife habitat, projects that improve and maintain water quality for fish, wildlife, and people, sustaining and enhancing water management to benefit fish and wildlife, and improving outdoor recreational opportunities. So you'll hear fish and wildlife come up a lot with this program, with it being primarily from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. A lot of the work that we do is anything that's going to primarily benefit that fish and wildlife habitat. But again, you're going to hear that water quality, the water quantity management in there as well. So competitive proposals for this program are going to touch on at least one of those strategic program areas. Oftentimes, just due to the nature of the work that we fund, projects are going to address several of those. But we also fund in kind of 4 different funding categories. So we fund anywhere from implementation to planning projects to capacity building and research evaluation and monitoring. With implementation being our largest funding category, we have about 8 million available, with the largest grant range, that being 75,000 to 2 million. The other categories are planning, capacity building, and research grants. We're expecting to have about $2 million available for each of those categories. And again, all of those funding categories do have a 1-to-1 non-federal match requirement, except for our capacity building funds. That's really hopefully to target smaller, more local organizations. So we've lowered that match requirement to 25% of the request. We also recognize, that match can be a burden for applicants, especially with federal applications. So we do allow for a match look back period in this grant program. So you can count match spent anywhere from January 1st, 2024 through the period of performance for your application. So hopefully that helps alleviate some of the match burden. Just to wrap up, we're hoping to open the RFP in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to have proposal labs available or virtual coaching sessions. That's with the National Fish and Wildlife team, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We'll have a link available to sign up for those time slots in our request for proposals. It'll also be in my email signature, so I can provide that information maybe in the chat after we wrap up here. We found these sessions to be really helpful for both NIFWIF and the Fish and Wildlife Service team, just to kind of learn about what's going on the ground. But we also find it to be really helpful for the applicants to get kind of that one-on-one time. We are going to be having an applicant webinar in the next couple of weeks that will cover everything that I just spoke about in a lot more detail. So I'd love for some of y'all to join us that are working in the Delaware. We do also have an outreach list. I promise we do not abuse it. I think we use it maybe once or twice a year, largely for notification of the RFP opening or other funding opportunities that come up in the Delaware. So again, I'll drop my email information in the chat. If you want to shoot me an email, we'd be happy to add you to that list. I think with that, I'll pass to Jake to kind of wrap us up.
Yes, thank you, Erin. And again, maybe I did a little bit of the gloss over of the Chesapeake programs. Maybe that was in part. I can say maybe you're a little bit more familiar with them, but yes, there's all those details. We will also be having applicant webinars as well to kind of spell all that out. But I just want to kind of take a couple minutes to just like some high level things I think that apply to both programs, and Erin can tell me otherwise and chime in here. But just like tips and tricks, really sort of considerations. One, Erin kind of touched on it at the end. I can't tell you how valuable it is when people come talk to us about what they want to do, right? That is part of our job, honestly, Erin and I, and that's part of what the federal government, for example, pays us to do, is we're not just out there writing checks and running programs. We're there to talk to people. I think Erin's like me, like we're geeks on this stuff too. Like we love to talk about it. And so really want to, strongly advocate that you take advantage of talking to us even before you get pen to paper on a proposal, right? Like we want to be able to help you sort of make sure, number one, it's a good fit. We don't want you spending time and spinning your wheels if our funding opportunities are just not a good fit. Yes, very good for us to sort of learn about what you're trying to do, but really, I think the proof is in sort of the feedback that we're able to give, right? So for both of us, that's us, that's our federal agency partners as well. I know in our Chesapeake program, we also have these field liaisons who also sort of provide those same kind of benefits. Kristen Hughes Evans is one that you are intimately familiar with. So if it's Kristen or if it's myself in the Chesapeake, just really want to advocate that you take advantage of essentially the fact that we're here to talk and we want to talk to you. I like to say like funders are people too, and sometimes people can forget about that. With respect to like the specific work that I know that y'all are really interested in. One is, Erin touched on it. I'll say also for our Chesapeake programs, these programs have benefited from some of this increase in federal funding, right? So both BIL and IRA funding. So that being said, there's more money than ever in these programs. That's not always going to be the case, right? So take advantage, number one. Number two, specifically with respect to IRA funding, both of our programs, as well as our big Conservation Partners program, has benefited significantly from additional funding from NRCS, specifically to help support technical assistance to help deliver those Farm Bill programs. So that's awesome. We also have like a requirement and an expectation though in our ability to spend those dollars well for the agency, that our applicants are really working in consultation with NRCS. So really want to strongly encourage you, and maybe a good way to do this is, come talk to Aaron or I first about, your project idea, see what opportunities are there. But we are really encouraging folks that have a good fit and alignment with, Farm Bill programs and NRCS priorities to also talk to your state conservationist, state resource conservationist about your project idea. Number one, that's like a basic CYA for all of us. Like we don't want to and really can't spend those NRCS dollars on projects if there's not sort of support from the state NRCS office. So like to a certain extent, like it's a must have. Also, and this is sort of a second just tip or consideration, I think for both of these landscapes, we really do look for projects that are effectively leveraging the portfolio of funding programs and resources that are available out there, right? So in the ag space specifically, really we want to be able to see that there's at least good faith efforts, if not like strong plans, to be able to effectively leverage things like Farm Bill cost share programs to get work done, right? Yes, there's all types of reasons why Farm Bill programs might not be a fit, cost share requirements, practice specifications, whatever. However, like we really want you to be kind of thinking first about, are there Farm Bill programs out there? Are there state cost share programs like, the MAX program in Maryland, for example, that you can be leveraging as a portfolio to sort of supplement what you're asking for of NIFWF? And even further, like, we see really good examples of where the NIFWF funding can be a really critical gap filler, right? So again, if it's some of that cost share, sort of buying down that cost share that Jen talked about, or supplementing technical assistance capacity out there on the landscape to help develop. So really this whole idea of generally we want to see you leveraging cost share programs that are out there, but specifically, with respect to NRCS, like, in addition to us, we would really encourage you to talk to your NRCS partners and colleagues about your project idea, because if they're supportive of what you're trying to do with the NIFWF grant, can definitely increase your likelihood of success.
2 minutes, Jake.
Nope, thank you. And then maybe a last little just kind of thread and comment. And I know that this is true for sure in our Chesapeake programs. I think, organization wide, I know it's sort of a direction that we're going, but I just really want to underscore sort of what we value in ag conservation work, right? So we're the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So of course we value habitat work, right? For sure. And there's a lot of opportunity there and a lot of partners that are doing that work. In both Chesapeake Bay and in Delaware, water quality is also, a primary driver. And in Chesapeake, it's honestly probably the driver. And so a lot of our work over the past 2.5 decades in Chesapeake world has really been focused on projects that are able to accelerate sort of demonstrable nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment load reductions. And that is still a priority, right? Still will be a priority. We need to continue putting in effort there just based on the nature of the problem. We can't stop. We're never done, right? But one thing that I know that we've been trying to do in Chesapeake world is really help to continue sort of orient our ag conservation partners towards and sort of around the whole concept of climate and resilience in the context of agriculture, right? There is sort of it may be slow creeping. It might also be really fast, depending on kind of, how you measure these things. But, this emphasis on climate, carbon, et cetera. So I just want to like throw out there that yes, like you might read, and it's in our program title, like our Innovative Nutrient Sediment Reduction Grants program. Yes, we still care about water quality, and that still is very much a primary outcome for our programs. But just want to encourage you all to be thinking about us as NIFWF as a way that you all can continue to build your capacity and flex your muscles around how you can continue to sort of expand what you're working on and sort of delivering with producers to also be incorporating carbon stewardship, climate outcomes, resilience as well. Because again, to Jen's point, like, super wet for 6 months, super dry for another 6 months, right? Yes, we'd love to be able to measure nutrient and sediment load reductions, but if we can be delivering solutions that in that example are sort of helping producers, be more resilient, be able to sort of deal with these things like climate shocks, into the future, that is definitely an increasing sort of interest and emphasis for us. So just some kind of last nuggets, threads to maybe get your, thinking caps on, but really appreciate the opportunity. Again, I'll put my contact information in the chat, but stay tuned to our website in the next week or two. You're going to have RFPs to read, and please, 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 holler at Aaron and I. We'd love to talk to you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Aaron and Jake. Really appreciate your inviting us to reach out to you and have conversation. I think that's really helpful. So folks, again, put your questions in the chat, and we'll have a chance to catch up again with Aaron and Jake as we finish up our panel. So rounding out the panel is Whitney Vaughn from the Chesapeake Bay Trust. Whitney, the stage is yours.
All right, thanks so much. Just confirming that everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Awesome, perfect. All right, so I'm Whitney Vaughn with the Chesapeake Bay Trust. I'm a program officer there on the restoration team, but I will be talking about some various programs that the trust has that I think would be of interest to this group here. But it's going to span across programs that are both on our outreach team and also our restoration team. But any questions that you have, please feel free to put them into the chat, and I will try to answer what I can. But if not, I would love to get you connected with the appropriate staff member to get your questions answered. So to get started, sure. Okay. So just a very quick overview about the Chesapeake Bay Trust. If you all are not aware of who we are a nonprofit organization based in Annapolis, Maryland, as Bob had mentioned, at the start of this session. And our goal is ultimately to empower people to restore nature. And so, all of our different grant programs will, tackle this from a different angle, but that ultimately is our goal. And so just kind of like a quick overview, we have grant making opportunities that span environmental restoration, outreach, and also education programs. But on top of that, we also do have capacity building programs and also workforce development programs. So the trust offers a whole multitude of opportunities for folks within the watershed, to explore. And so I'm just very happy to be able to share that all with you all today. So, and also just something to let you all know, in fiscal year 24, we did award about $14.7 million in funding to over 600 projects. So we are very well, situated to handle lots of different projects and, essentially be the fiscal sponsor for a lot of our program partners to get the projects on the ground. Again, to tackle our goal of restoring nature and empowering people to do that. So this is a quick graphic. It's a lot of programs on here right now, but just kind of wanted to give you a quick gauge of, different programs that the trust offers. And I think at this point, this graphic might be missing like one or two programs because we're constantly getting new partnerships and putting new programs online. But, kind of what I mentioned, we do have restoration and science programs, outreach programs, capacity building, environmental education, workforce development through our Climate Corps program. And we also do have rebate incentive programs. So we have a multitude of things. So again, I will be, I think, exploring about 7 of them, but anything that you're interested in, please go to our grants and opportunities page, and this is where that QR code leads to, and it will lead you to the specific page for the grant program, and within there, it'll have the contact information of the program officer who is in charge of that grant program, who can be able to tell you everything that you need to know about the program. So moving into the first program that I did want to highlight to you all is the Keep Maryland Beautiful program. So I know that some of the audience is not, based just in Maryland, but, I have specifically the eligible program location so that if this opportunity is something that is relevant to you. But so this one is, as the title suggests, something that's only eligible within Maryland. And in general, this program seeks to engage diverse organizations to increase civic engagement through environmental stewardship practices. It also helps build the capacity of land trusts within Maryland, and it also supports tree planting on agricultural land. And so this is a partnership between the Maryland Environmental Trust, the Maryland Department of Transportation, and also the Maryland Department of Agriculture. And so eligible applicants, can include nonprofits, land trusts, community and homeowners associations, and many more. So if you ever are in question about whether or not your organization is eligible for a program, again, just reach out to us and we'll help sort that out. So this program will likely reopen in fall 2025. So just keep your eye on our grants and opportunities page, and that is always updated with the most recent program that is open. So this program is split up into 3 different tracks. So I start the ones that I think are most relevant to us here. So track 1, again, is just community stewardship. So anything that gets people out on the ground to, essentially be active to restoring Maryland's environment. So that could be like trash litter cleanups or building a rain garden, anything like that that's eligible through the track 1. But track 2 is building the capacity of land trusts. So, essentially there's tons of land trusts within Maryland, and, they might have different capacity building needs to effectively meet their missions and their goals. So this track allows folks to apply for up to $10,000 in support for their capacity building. And it could be anything from ensuring that their land trust has like the appropriate I guess software maybe to do like their needs, such as like getting GIS software, to map out where their easements are going to be. That is something that is actually eligible for funding through track 2 of this capacity building track. And then track 3 is tree planting on agricultural lands. So this honestly is just tree planting anywhere on land that is designated as agricultural use. And even if it's not designated as agricultural use, reach out to the program manager and they will kind of sort out with the program partner if they think that your area could be eligible. Essentially, like if your area is a working farm in any capacity, it might be eligible even if it's not designated as ag, like on the land records. But essentially, this one is tree planting from any capacity. There's no real like limit on how many trees you need to plant. You could plant as many as 20 trees to as many as 500 trees. This program just really wants to get trees on the ground. So Keep Maryland Beautiful is a program that is doing a whole multitude of things. But essentially, if you're interested in any of these tracks, the URL for this program is on the bottom, and the grant manager for this program is going to be Julian Segovia. Okay, so moving on to our next one, we have our capacity building initiative at the organizational level. So this one ultimately is to support the capacity of organizations working on both community, environmental health issues. So this program is eligible across the Chesapeake Bay watershed, including the Maryland coastal bays and also the Yagaini watersheds in Maryland. So this one is something that, again, the scope is much larger, and so eligible for, folks all around the Delmarva. And so eligible applicants include nonprofit organizations, tribal and local governments, and anybody who provides services within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So with that said, it's kind of like you could be outside the Chesapeake Bay watershed, but as long as you're showing that you're doing work within the watershed, you could be eligible for this capacity building initiative grant program. And this one anticipates to open in May 2025, but they are still working on the back end to make sure that, it will open around that time, but it definitely will be reopening next year at some time. And so there is a star on nonprofit organizations because there is like a small little specificity. For nonprofit organizations, you need to show that you have at least one full-time employee, but also less than 50 employees. And then also you should have like a watershed / natural resource mission or goal or some type of work that you're doing. And you also must have an active board of directors. So this capacity building initiative program, ultimately focuses on addressing nonprofit challenges that improve an organization's ability to adapt and be effective long-term to achieve their organization's mission. So this can look like a whole bunch of different things. And so I provided some examples of eligible project types. And again, it's not limited to this list. And if you have any questions about if what you want to do is eligible, then please reach out to Amber Cameron on our team who can help talk through that. But so just to pull some stuff out, something that you could apply for this program to do is to get contractual support to assess whether or not your organization is even operating effectively. Something else that you could also do is develop or refine a strategic plan or fundraising plan to make sure that you are meeting your goals, because funding is something that's definitely very important to making sure that an organization can function and do their work effectively. So these are just some of the very many things that the capacity building initiative is able to do. And I will move forward to the next program because I have a lot to get through and I want to make sure that I can get through all of them.
Yeah, Whitney, we have 2 minutes, so.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. 2 minutes, then I will just very quickly say this one, the Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Fund. This one is a new program that is looking to provide forestry funding in areas that are, historically disadvantaged within the Chesapeake watershed. And I'm going to move really quick here, so I'm really sorry for everybody. So hopefully the slides will be shared with you all so you can see these. So this one has different tracks too. And again, it can support some capacity building and also some tree planting and workforce development within the community forestry space. This next one, the Anne Arundel County Forestry and Forested Protection Land Protection Grant Program. This one is just within Anne Arundel County, but it's also tree planting on a larger scale. So it's really focusing on forestry and also protecting the land that the trees are planted on. So the protection can look like either something like a conservation easement or also a long-term protection agreement for tree planting. So any of those trees that are planted will ultimately be protected for at least 30 years or in perpetuity. The Watershed Restoration Grant Program, this one supports restoration efforts. So it's only inside the county and also some parts of the city, depending on the tract that you're applying for. But essentially, this one can do wetland restoration. It can also do habitat restoration through rain garden, stream restoration, bioswales, living shorelines, all those different things. And this program is actually open now, and it will be closing on March 20th. So if you have any questions on this program, please reach out to us, and we will have an info session on this one actually next week. So let me know if you have any questions on this Watershed Restoration Grant Program. Green Streets, Green Town, Green Streets, Green Jobs, Green Towns. This one is watershed wide. I will say this one is a competitive program, but basically it's greening the streets, or getting conceptual plans to engineer designs to implementation funds, to do anything that's essentially greening the area that you live in across the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Outreach and restoration. This one is Maryland only, but it just as the program states, is basically focusing on outreach efforts and also restoration efforts within Maryland. So again, all those things that the Watershed Restoration Grant Program can fund, the Outreach and Restoration Grant Program can also fund. And the last thing, we also do have rolling programs. These are smaller scale. You can apply anytime for them. And they can range from tree planting efforts to also like a community gardens of building and expanding community gardens within Prince George's County. So I don't think I have time to talk about our application process, but essentially all of our information is on our website and everything has to be applied through our online application portal. So my tips to you all for, navigating the trust process is just like Jake and Aaron said, make sure you talk to, the program officer that runs the program. We are here to help you all. And so any questions that you have about any programs, please reach out early and we'd love to talk to you all about whether or not you're eligible, how to make your project maybe more competitive within that space. And then also make sure that you apply early because sometimes the portal might be busy, a minute or two before it's about to close. So make sure you get your application in maybe at least like 5 hours or so. Like just give yourself some buffer time so that you're not nervous about whether or not your application will actually be submitted. But I'm so sorry that was such a quick speed through of all of our different programs. But we have so much, and I'd love to talk to you all more about it. And maybe we can set up a call on a separate time to talk about it at a more slow pace. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Whitney. New appreciation for the breadth and depth of your offerings and your support, and appreciate you opening the door for continued conversation with our folks. I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you. Thanks again so much.
Yeah,
thanks to all of our panelists. We now have some time to have some questions and some follow-up. Again, post your questions in the chat. I'll go back to one that was raised earlier for Sherry, and she has answered that question. The question was essentially, what's the best step, next step for somebody who's interested in signing up, and who should they reach out to? And Sherry's answer was to reach out to the local USDA office, and if you have issues, to reach out to Sherry. Sherry, anything you want to expand on that?
I would just say that the important thing here is if you're interested in funding, to know that we accept applications all year round. However, there is a period of time where we batch those applications and consider them for funding. So I would just say make sure that when you're going into the office, you are utilizing the verbiage of addressing a resource concern, because sometimes when people go in and they're just talking about what they would like to do, it even though it is a resource concern, sometimes unfortunately if you don't use the correct verbiage. So letting them know what it is you are wanting to address. And the first thing I would say is to also make sure that you have your FSA records established first. You have to establish those records first and then come over and apply for your program. But over at FSA, they should be able, if you go in and tell them that you're interested in applying for conservation programs and you need to get your paperwork set up, they should be able to help you. Another mistake I see is that however it is that you choose to do business, if you want to do it as an individual, fill out your paperwork as the individual. But if you have an entity or you're choosing to DBA doing business as or something like that, fill out that paperwork how you want to do business with NRCS over at FSA. And that's about all I have to say. And like I said, if for some reason someone is not able to get some assistance, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect. I know people just about in all of the states, so I'll be happy to connect anyone with someone that can get them the assistance they need in their respective states. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sherry. A question was raised about will the chat be available after today's meeting, and notes been posted that the chat will not be available. Of course, we're recording this entire session so you can listen to it, but if you're looking for specific chat information, we suggest that you copy that information now so that you've got it. And of course, our panelists have provided their contact information as well. So just a reminder about that. That looks to be all of the questions in the chat. So we'll go ahead with the next, on to the next item, the agenda. But before we do that, again, I just want to give a virtual thanks to our panelists for being with us today. I think we've gotten a great perspective. And a thing I know that I particularly appreciated is all of them have expressed a willingness and an openness for us to reach out to them and directly have conversation around our work and how to do it better. And that's really kind of at the core of what we're trying to do at Delmarva Land and Litter Collaborative. So appreciate so much each of you posing that for us. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Paula for moving on with our agenda.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Bob, and thank you to all the panelists that just spoke, and then the previous one as well. Lots of great information. I know this can be a little tricky with a virtual meeting, but we had timed a break just to give everybody a bit of a pause to digest, maybe go get a cup of coffee, do whatever you need to do. It is just a 15-minute break, so we will come back at about 10:50. Guess so. That's not quite 15 minutes, but we'll restart then. And please feel free. I know that not everybody can copy what's in the chat. Please feel free to take a screen capture or something else. If you need that information, to the best of our ability, we'll make sure that a lot of this is captured in the notes and in the presentations themselves. I know a lot of the links and emails are to the programs. So thank you. If you want to during the break, please take a look at the Delmarva Land and Litter site. The link is in the chat again to learn more about the group that's hosting this. Many of the speakers have said our group really is about collaboration and finding ways to support both sustainable farming and environmental health and water quality around Delmarva. So there's a new video at the top of our site that has many of our members talking about their experience and some case studies too. So if you get a chance later today or whenever, we'd love for you to take a look, learn more about the group. All right, so with that, please take a break and we will come back in about 15 minutes and restart the next panel on case studies. And that's the last one before we really wrap up. So we'll see you in a few. Thank you.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Joe, but 2 minutes before we get started, do you have any slides you want us to share, or are you planning to share yours?
Yeah, I have a PowerPoint that I have on my computer that I'll share.
Perfect. Thank you.
Amy, you're up first. Are you ready to go?
I am.
Okay. While you're pulling up your slides, I'll give a brief introduction. Paula, can you tell us when we're ready to start? Do we have a couple more minutes or?
Yeah, let's give it like 1 more minute. That'll allow maybe Amy to get her slides teed up, and then you can kick off the panel and introduce it.
Okay.
It's 10:50 now, so whenever
Okay.
you want to go.
All right. So thank you all for joining us this morning. We have 4 speakers that are here to talk about how they have leveraged partnerships and funding opportunities to get really big, important projects on the ground. They are each going to take about 10 minutes to talk about their projects, and we've asked them to address 3 general questions. First, what problem or opportunity were you addressing? Second, how did you put together funding that you needed to achieve your goals? And then third, what partnerships or collaborations were essential in securing funding and achieving your project goals? So that's a lot to cover in 10 minutes. So thank you all in advance for being streamlined. Amy Mullen is going to kick us off. She's the events coordinator with Future Harvest. Amy grew up on her family's nursery in Baltimore County and has dedicated her career to projects that promote both community health and healthy agricultural systems. Future Harvest, for those of you who don't know, is one of the leading partners on the Million Acre Challenge, and they are a membership nonprofit that works to support sustainable agriculture. Okay, Amy, we're ready for you to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here amongst many of our partners. And today I'll share a bit more about the Million Acre Challenge and our goals and our funding and some of our partners. And so, yeah, I'll start off with our projects, some of our partnerships, and I'm going to go through 3 case studies and how I'll be very brief, I promise, and how we have leveraged partnerships and funding to achieve our overall goals through those 3 grant programs. To begin, the Million Acre Challenge is a collaborative project of American Farmland Trust, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and Future Harvest. Our project partners work closely with farmers, farm educators, agencies, scientists, and consumers to supply critical tools and resources that support soil health in Maryland, and we are expanding throughout the Chesapeake region. Founded in 2019, the Million Acre Challenge helps Maryland farmers build soil health, increase farm profitability, and improve water quality while making farms resilient and active in the face of climate change. Our farmer-focused collaborative uses soil health science, economics, education, and incentives to achieve our mission. Our vision is to enhance soil health and ecosystem health and increase farm profitability on at least 1 million agriculture acres in Maryland, with significant progress and partnerships in the Chesapeake region by 2030. And so really partnership is at the heart of what we do. So I'm so excited to talk more about that today. Sorry, I lost my notes. So this is just a little bit more about what we do and how we do it. And so we have really soil testing, farmer networks, practice implementation, and economic case studies are really at the heart of what we do. And in each of these steps, partnerships are essential. And we have a lot of partnerships across all of these steps, and we've really leveraged these critical relationships to meet our goals. But in each step, we understand the context and goals and strength of each organization. So we're really not trying to duplicate any efforts, but complementing which each organization is doing. We work closely with federal and state agencies. They've been really critical to programs like the RCPP and Climate Smart. FSA and NRCS local offices have been instrumental with enrolling farmers in some programs, as well as navigating complementary funding opportunities. The soil health conservation districts have been wonderful partners for educational workshops. Extension is just a massive partner for us. University of Maryland and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Sarah Hirsch will be discussing some more partnership programs that we work on later in this session. But we've really been delighted to be part of those programs. Extension works with us through grants, as well as partnering on workshops and sharing resources, referring farmers. They are experts in research. Their strong network of experts, farmers, and other partners have just been instrumental to the success in this region. We have also worked closely with other nonprofits to collaborate on grants. Also, we extend our reach when we, look through our, sorry, I'm trying to scroll down my notes. When we're considering what's working in other regions, how can we duplicate it, and how we can collaborate but not create two of the same programs. We've also worked with other researchers, such as those at the Colorado State Institute for Research and Social Sciences, as well as Regen Score, which is an alliance of farmers, business, and researchers, such as UC Davis, Open Teams, RSI. Their expertise and partnership has been instrumental. We've also partnered with policymakers through legislative farm tours to create policy change, and we've been really grateful for the Maryland Department of Agriculture's steadfast partnership when it comes to cost share and creating science-based programming. And I'll start with a little bit about one program that we are wrapping up now and is transitioning to a new grant program, the Innovative Nutrient and Sediment Reduction Grant. And we'll be expanding some of these activities into a small watershed grant. We've really been so grateful to focus on farmer networks, farmer education, and farmer-led projects to protect water quality via soil health practices. The key partners on this have been our key MAC partners, but also the Institute for Research in the Social Scientists and Regen Score. In 2025, we look forward to doubling our number of advanced farmer networks and deepening our research and offering new complementary bonus payment options through some of these programs that I'll discuss shortly. And one of those is the Regional Conservation Program. It is a 100% cost share at NRCS rates, and we hope to help farmers navigate these various programs and help save farmers time and maximize how they are interacting with conservation based on their goals. And understanding that there's a variety of programs both on the federal and the state level that interact to help farmers meet these goals and meeting it in one place. And we are able to offer this funding to all Maryland farmers at any production system, any scale, on both leased and owned land, and we are prioritizing underserved producers. So we're really grateful to be able to be partnering with these various programs to do this. Now, there are a lot of practices under this really wide umbrella, and I'm not going to read them out to you, but I've highlighted a couple just here that have been pretty popular. Now, to apply, folks can either go through their local NRCS office or through the Million Acre Challenge. So we're really grateful for that partnership. Another program that has also been that bonus offering that we're able to offer through NRCS is PASA's Climate Smart and Farming and Marketing program. Now, I know that there are a lot of climate smart programs out there, so I'm just going to highlight one that we are a partner on. Now, there are a variety of partners from Maine to South Carolina on this grant. So we're really grateful to be part of this superstar team and be able to compare notes, what's working, what's not, and how to best serve farmers. And just a little bit of background on the Climate Smart grant and how we are doing this work and meeting these goals through production strategies. And there are 26 climate smart practices that we are highlighting through this program and through the NRCS practice standard. And we're able to offer financial incentives, technical assistance, monitoring support, marketing assistance, and educational resources like workshops, field days, and peer-to-peer learning, which is really at the core of what we do. And this is just a little bit about how this works. And so FSA has been really critical to this work and getting folks enrolled. And we are just so excited to be launching this program and helping highlight also other climate smart programs throughout this, because we know that farmers have been hearing climate smart, and knowing which one's which, and helping farmers understand the differences between them and how they can maximize their experience as they consider their conservation goals and their overall economic and soil health goals. But just a little bit more about how to get involved with the Million Acre Challenge. That QR code there is to our website and how to enroll if you are a farmer, but we also welcome all funders and technical service providers to stay connected with us through our monthly newsletters. Also send us any content that you want highlighted in our monthly newsletter. We are active on social media and our YouTube. We are launching a new podcast, or Soil Health to Go. Lunch and Learns are going into a podcast this month. So excited about that. And I've also included my email and the email of one of my colleagues below, should you have any questions or want to chat more about our programming. But thank you so much.
Amy, thank you. That was awesome. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all the good work you all are doing. Up next, we have David Baird. He is the manager for the Sussex County Conservation District, or is it the district coordinator? Excuse me. And while David is pulling up his slides, let me just give you a couple facts that you may not know about Sussex County. They are they're the largest agricultural county. The ag industry exceeds 1.2 billion. And there are over 1,300 farms, and it's the #1 broiler and lima bean production county in the US. So that's pretty cool.
Thanks for all those facts,
Take it away.
Kristen. Greatly appreciate it.
Sure.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So as Kristen had stated, my name's David Baird. I'm the district coordinator with the Sussex Conservation District, and very proud of the work that we do here. Amazing staff that really has developed some great inroads into the community, and primarily because they're products of the community. And we recognize that those peer-to-peer relationships and long-standing relationships are the key to our success here at SCD. And today we're going to talk about just a couple of examples of how we've been able to put some of those relationships to work and build some successful partnerships. I want to start by just highlighting some of the items that really we look at as keys to successful partnerships when we're considering opportunities here at SCD. First and foremost is when we're looking to partner with other entities or other organizations, we want to make sure that we're bringing our strengths to the table, and we really want to offer what we do well, what we've refined, and what we've perfected over our 80 years of experience in the conservation world. We also want to make sure that we're adding value to the process. So, if we're going to do something, let's make sure we're bringing something to the table, our strengths, but also knowing that those strengths are going to have a meaningful impact to whatever the goal of the project is, as well as moving on. We want to make sure that we're not just duplicating what our partners are doing in that process. We want to complement whatever our partners are doing in that. For instance, it's not, something that we want to do is, partner with another conservation district that does the same thing, or another entity that does the same exact thing that we do. When we look for partners, we're going to say, what do they bring to the table to help us out? Or how can we help fill a need that they're not able to fulfill? And you'll see some examples of that with the examples that I'll share with you here in just a few minutes. And then finally, whatever type of partnership that you get into, make sure you're able to deliver. Always over deliver if at all possible. It's just like anything. Your value and your reputation is only in how well you're able to deliver that. So just make sure you have the capacity within yourself to make sure you can get whatever you've committed to done. Now, the first project that I want to talk about is a coastal migration effort that we helped really spearhead here along the Delaware coast. And this was a statewide initiative that really came up in conversations with NRCS. And I know Jake Riley was on earlier and talked about the value of just having, preliminary conversations with folks. And that's something that we do on a periodic basis with NRCS is, just trying to figure out what their needs are, trying to align that with our goals and the opportunities that we see. And this was a classic example that started from a simple conversation where NRCS was starting to recognize, sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, coastal inundation, were all potential threats to, Delaware agriculture, especially once you get along the Atlantic coastline, the Inland Bays coastline, and the Delaware Bay and Delaware River. So, we started out by saying, okay, NRCS, what are you trying to accomplish? And the first question we had was, why aren't you able to do this yourself? And it was really just a capacity issue for them at the time. They didn't have adequate staffing to take this on, and were looking for some assistance. They could provide some support. So that's where our wheels started turning to say, where can we possibly bring some value to the process? So, throughout this process, you can see the objectives that we had. Very simple and straightforward, but it was really to say, how can we identify potential landowners who are going to be impacted by, any of these coastal migration issues. How can we increase awareness of assistance programs that are out there to help mitigate these potential threats? And then for those that are interested and want to take the next step, how can we provide conservation planning services to them as landowners here in Delaware that will open up the potential for them to apply for the EQIP programs or any of the easement programs through NRCS, or even possibly participate in the CREP program that is joined here between DENREC and NRCS and FSA in the district in Delaware. So those were all the things we were trying to achieve. And the way that we were able to proceed from this point was NRCS saw the value. Once we continued the conversations, they put together a cooperative agreement for us to perform these services. And we're able to do that over a number of years while we completed this effort. So you can see that NRCS provided funding for the agreement in the amount of $152,000 over a couple of years to support the effort. So that was very beneficial in moving forward. And then here at the district level, we took the lead on the project. And as we talked about with the goals, we provided outreach to landowners who could serve as potential candidates. We provided conservation technical assistance. And the goal of this entire project was to have 1,000 acres identified as potential candidates for this. And much to our surprise, we were able to almost triple those acres of folks who were interested in learning more about this program. We had just over 3,000 acres. The landowners on 3,000 of those acres statewide contact us saying, we want to learn more. And then from that point, we did a little bit more relationship building with those folks. And now we're working with landowners to do the conservation planning so that they will be teed up and eligible to apply for farm bill programs. Or for that fact, if that's not the best option for them, they're able to move forward with other funding opportunities on their land as well. So it really opens up a lot of great potential to see conservation practices implemented on the ground. And then you can see at the bottom of this screen, we were able to partner with the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. And this is a partnership that we call on quite a bit here in Sussex County at the district level, just because the inland bays are such a prominent part of our landscape here in Sussex County. But CIB had a much more robust GIS program at the time, and we utilized them to help us in the identification of parcels that met the criteria we were looking for, as well as to really hone in on the contact information for those landowners so that we could make direct contact. So when you talk about partnership, this turned out to be a very strong one between USDA, the Conservation District, and CIB, all of which we have very similar goals and objectives, but we were able to come together on those goals and objectives that tie us together and put together a great project. And I'm happy to say that we had a goal of reaching out and identifying 1,000 acres of potential lands. We've identified in more detail about 750 to 800 acres of people who are moving forward with the conservation planning at this point in time. And to date, we've completed about 150 to 200 acres of conservation planning, and we'll be continuing to work on some of those others over the next couple of months. So hopefully by this time next year, we'll have some new contract holders with NRCS that will be able to address their coastal migration issues through some of the farm bill programs that are offered through NRCS. So very pleased with this, but I thought this was a good example of a partnership that really starts from a conversation. And I think we've heard that echoed a couple of times today, and I can't stress that enough. The next project that I wanted to highlight is really more of the traditional relationship that the Sussex Conservation District has with NRCS, and that's on our wetland reserve enhancement projects. In this situation, we had a landowner down in the southern part of Sussex County reach out to SCD. And what their goals were to develop habitat. They saw this as a piece of land that had some opportunity to it. The natural conditions were right, and they just needed help moving forward, and some more trained eyes on the site to give them some advice and direction. And they reached out to the district. So once again, those personal conversations and relationships kick in. We go down, meet with the landowner, walk the land, and really come up with a couple of options for them to consider as they wanted to move forward. And one of the things that they really liked was the Wetland Reserve Enhancement Program through NRCS. And with that being said, that was a perfect opportunity for us to just hand over this application to the staff at NRCS, who's well-versed in the easement programs and the wetland programs there. And they were able to take the lead from that point. NRCS worked with the landowner on project funding. They did all of the design work on the project. They did all the layout on the project. And then the landowner, because of our relationship with them and the work we had done up front, wanted us to stay involved, and we were able to be selected as their contractor to install all the practices. So the SCD equipment program was heavily involved here. And as part of this project, we installed water control structures, ditch plugs, a ditch bank breach, and then we did some minor excavation that allowed for some shallow water wetlands on the property. And then ultimately that landowner just assigned payment from NRCS directly to SCD. So it was really simple from the landowner's perspective from start to finish. And because of the working relationship that we already had with USDA and NRCS, it was very seamless on the administrative side as well. So I know this is more of an example of some of the typical types of projects that you see between the district and NRCS, but I did think it was worthy of highlighting. And with that being said, I know we have some other presentations following, but my contact is here, and I look forward to any questions that you may have. I'll keep an eye out for those in the chat and be prepared to respond following all the presentations in this session. Thanks.
David, thank you. And folks, please do put your questions in the chat. We'll have time at the end to come back to them. Really appreciate your focus there on partnering with NRCS and how you all are complementing. And that great slide at the beginning with the keys to successful partnerships. That was really helpful for all of us. Sarah Hirsch is up next. Sarah Hirsch is a University of Maryland Extension educator, and we are really lucky to have her on the Lower Eastern Shore because she is an expert in cover crops, specifically not just any cover crops, not random cover crops, purposeful cover crops. So thinking about your field's agronomic specific conditions and how cover crops can help you meet those field production goals. Sarah, I know you can say all that better than I, but there we go.
Right. Are you able
Okay.
to see my PowerPoint?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, all right,
Thanks,
great.
Sarah.
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning, everyone. So as Kristen said, I work for University of Maryland Extension. We do receive federal, state, and local funding, and our programs are accessible to everyone. So today I'm going to talk about our project on cover crops, and it goes by a couple different names, but our farmers that are collaborating with this project call it the Bonus Cover Crop Project. And the goal of this project was to take, so Maryland and Delaware are already top states, 1 and 2 in the amount of, or the percent of land in cover crops. So really for our region, the goal is to take cover cropping to the next level. And how can we get more out of the cover crops that we're already putting out on the landscape? How can those cover crops lead to more financial incentives for the farmers, giving them agronomic benefits, but also, of course, to the environment and get more environmental benefits from those cover crops. So our idea was that there's not one size fits all cover crop, and that cover cropping should involve significant planning with regards to site specific factors and cover crop purpose. So this project, which I'll get into how it was funded in a bit, but we had 2 big grants that provided the primary funding so far. And the goal was to provide farmers with technical and financial support to reduce their risk when they try out new cover cropping practices on a field scale. So we really wanted this farmers to be able to try out things on a whole field across the landscape. And this photo is showing a field day. So another goal, which I'll talk about, was really to bring out others in the community and their neighbors so that they could see cover cropping, advanced cover cropping on a field scale, being done by their neighbor farmers. So the first step of the project was that farmers and extension personnel had a consulting meeting where they planned out their cover crop. And in this planning, we talked about what was their purpose for the cover crop, what window did their cover crop fit into, and in order to try to determine what cover crop would provide the most benefits for that specific site and the benefits that the farmer needed for his or her land. And then we also talked about expectations. So we want to be realistic in what cover crops will actually, how they will actually perform within the restraints of the cash crop window, and how they will actually, if say a particular species they had in mind, will that actually meet the purpose? So we worked with 11 farmers in year 1 of the project, 2022 to 21 farmers last year, and currently we're working with 17 farmers. Some of them are repeat, some of them have been in it all 3 years, and other ones are in 1 or 2 of those years. I just threw that in to show kind of, this is what one step involved with our planning, where we draw out the cash crop rotation and kind of discuss what cover crops are going to be a good fit within that timetable. So the next step is that the farmers planted and managed the cover crops according to the plan that we all came up with. So it was their responsibility to do that, and it was on a field scale, so beyond the abilities of us as researchers to actually plant it. So the farmers did that. The financial support was $30 per acre, and they were allowed to enroll up to 150 acres in the program. This payment was in addition to whatever other funding that they received. So a lot of them are in the traditional Maryland Cover Crop program. Some of them are in the Maryland Cover Crop Plus program. And then I'll talk about the partnership we had with MDA, because if they wanted to try a cover crop that fell outside of what was allowed in those other programs, then Maryland Department of Agriculture partnered with us. They had another grant, a soil health grant, and the farmers that were collaborating with our project were able to get their base payment from this other pool of money from Maryland Department of Ag. So really like a good partnership there that allowed the farmers in our project to try some things even outside of the traditional cover crop program and still not lose financially. They were still able to receive their base payment that they're accustomed to, as well as the additional $30 per acre from our project. This is just an example of one cover crop on one farm that was tried in Wicomico County. It was a vetch and wheat cover crop. You can see here a lot of benefits toward the soil health. There's an earthworm there, and this was the mulch underneath the soybean in October that you could see like still a nice thick layer of mulch. So having the benefits of reducing weed pressure, adding fertility with the vetch. A big part of the project is farmer to farmer learning. So we have 1 to 2 meetings every year where we meet with the collaborating farmers from the project. So that's the photo here on the left where all of the farmers, as well as us on the team, get together in a room and discuss what they're doing, what's working, what's not working. We get them to fill out a survey about our actual project and if they're satisfied or how we could be doing better. The photo on the right is at a public field day where at another farm in Wicomico County where neighboring farmers and others who are interested in the community can come out and see the different types of cover cropping practices that our farmers are trying. Here's some other pictures of a field day, and I liked how Amy and I had a similar photo here because we are partnering with Future Harvest and the soil health benchmark study, and we did have this joint field day. We have a lot of field days together at Steve Kruszewski's farm here in Queen Anne's County, and you could see here where they were talking about seed size and equipment and getting into a lot of the technical details of these cover cropping practices. We're collecting a lot of different types of data, so a lot of records on the field history and management, financial records. We're doing a partial budget analysis of these different cover cropping practices. Our goal is to make case studies of some of these practices that the farmers are trying, so other farmers can learn from them. In addition to doing the public field days, we'll have the written case studies. We have a survey asking farmers about their satisfaction with the different types of cover crops. We partnered with Colorado State University Institute for Research in the Social Sciences, which Amy also mentioned, and they did a social network survey, which was basically assessing how do farmers get their information and who are they learning from. And then we also have a survey that field day attendees fill out. In addition, we collect the agronomic data, the fall and spring cover crop biomass samples. We assess the nitrogen and carbon content of the different biomass samples of the different cover crops. And then we're partnering with the Million Acre Challenge and Soil Health Benchmark study to check the soil health of our collaborating farms. So another great partnership there where we're kind of leveraging those resources. This project started out with 2 grants. So Sustainable Chesapeake was lead on the first grant, which was an NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant Program. And University of Maryland Extension, we were not lead on either of these grants. So it just highlighting the importance of these partnerships and working with everybody together. So we were a sub-award on that project. And that began in 2022. The next project we got shortly after, where Future Harvest was the lead on that project. And we again, Extension was a sub-award. And that was the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's Chesapeake Bay Small Watershed Grants Implementation Program. And we're excited that Mark Townsend, who's another ag agent for University of Maryland Extension, recently received another award from NIFWIF, the Innovative Nutrient and Sediment Reduction Grant. And so we are able to continue this work and not only continue it right now, all of our farmers have been on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, but we're able to expand it. This new grant will be statewide in Maryland. Currently, most of our farmers have been grain growers, but this new grant will have 4 different types of growers with different cost share structures. So we'll have grain growers, vegetable growers, growers that graze livestock, and then micro farmers. So we'll be expanding out to encourage these other types of farmers to participate. I think I mentioned all of these partners, but again, like this was definitely a group effort, a lot of collaborations. We would not have been able to do this without everyone's support. I mentioned how Maryland Department of Agriculture was able to provide those base payments through another grant project that they had, their Healthy Soils grant. They were able to provide those base payments for the farmers that wanted to try things outside the parameters of the traditional Maryland cover crop programs. They also helped us to send farmers our way and recruit farmers. Some farmers that they already had contacts with, they sent our way, and we were able to reach out to them as collaborators. I'll put my contact information up there. Please email me or call if you want to be on my mailing list for reports or outcomes of this project. And I think we're waiting to the end for questions.
Yes, although while we're transitioning over to Joe, there is one quick question that you can answer, and it's, does the cover crop program include phosphorus levels and movement?
Oh, we are not measuring phosphorus. Nope.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah, thank you so much for that. I love how we started off with this small grant and then you've successfully built it, and now you're just taking over Maryland with this project. And you're very humble, and you didn't mention that there's new extension guides for extension agents to support farmers in being more thoughtful and impactful with their cover cropping program. So thank you, Sarah, for your presentation and for all your wonderful leadership.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe Collins is up next, and I'm really excited to include Joe on this. And my fellow DLLC steering committee members will recall our recent meeting. We had discussions about tile drains and the challenge of maintaining those and water drainage. And I had the wonderful opportunity to visit the Doe Creek Wildlife Management Area and tour it with Joe Collins this summer. And what really stuck out to me is that their upstream stormwater runoff is their most valued resource. And so I really just was enchanted at the idea of how we can use our stormwater runoff to create this wonderful habitat. And Joe is with the Department of Wildlife Resources for Virginia. He's the Eastern Shore Wildlife Management Area manager. Am I saying that right? Eastern Shore Manager of Wildlife Management Areas. And Joe is an expert on how to provide habitat for wildlife. So Joe, take it away. We can see your screen, and this works fine. We can see the things on the side, but I don't want to derail you too long with the view. It's fine. Let's just go with it. Yep.
Oh, I'll just do it regular. All right. Is that better?
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, no problem. So like she said, I've worked for Virginia Wildlife Resources. I've been here with them for about 5 years. Previous experience as a seasonal technician in Ohio, as Grand River Wildlife Area, which was mostly in natural wetlands. Coming here to Virginia, we started doing more and more with the man-made impoundments in that. So a little background on Doe Creek. We purchased it in 2015, 2016 with a host of different conservation partners, Ducks Unlimited, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Nature Conservancy, the Wildlife Foundation, And when we purchased the land, we had nobody here on the Eastern Shore working full time. So the impoundments and everything went idle for roughly a couple of years. So we started getting woody encroachment, that type of thing. Just a little bit of a picture of Doe Creek here. So we're this neck here on the left side is Deep Creek, and then on the right side is Doe Creek. The yellow in there is the actual impoundments we have.
And you might want to advance your slide. We're still seeing your cover slide.
You might be able to, can you click on the slide 2 on the left of your screen there and see if that'll move it? There we go.
That work?
Yeah, now. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Slide 2, this is just showing our partners in that for when we purchased the land there, kind of this is Doe Creek on your right-hand side there, kind of, and the impoundments are inside of Doe Creek and Deep Creek for it with the impoundments there. The white polygon on the south side is actually where those tax ditches or the ditches that fill these impoundments don't originate, but that's where the bulk majority of it passes through this lower polygon, comes straight down the center of Doe Creek Wildlife Management Area, and eventually ends up inside of these waterfowl impoundments for it. So it's miles of ditches that all lead to this neck of Doe Creek here, and that is mostly how we flood our impoundments there. So the ditches, or typically we would have a tropical storm or a hurricane, something like that, that would bring us a large rain event, and it would put water on our impoundments, and we trap all that water on to the impoundments themselves. Around the edges of our impoundments were these large borrow ditches that they use to build the dikes on there. So for us to actually start flooding our impoundment to get waterfowl habitat or shorebird habitat and that, we had to fill millions of gallons within these borrow ditches. And we really didn't have control over when that was going to happen. This year we're in such a drought, we still don't have water on it, even with doing some work and stuff like that. All of our ditches are dry, but in years past, the ditches were overflowing with water, nowhere for the water to go for it. The second problem with it is we had old agar drains that either got hit by a mower, the boards didn't seal correctly anymore. It was just, we couldn't control our water. Water was seeping out the backside of our impoundments because of these ditches that they dug at negative grade for us. So we are losing tons of water to both the borrow ditches and to these tax ditches that could have been used to fill our impoundments, to do more soil management on them. The last thing that kind of this project was going to entail is when they built these dikes on these borrow ditches, they built them at such steep inclines that you couldn't really keep the woody vegetation from growing on the sides of our dikes. And the muskrats were actually burrowing into the sides of the dikes. So the third kind of problem that we were having is being able to maintain the dikes and seepage from that. So how did this project with DU get started? So it was actually similar to this. It was a forum about a Black Duck initiative that Ducks Unlimited was doing on the shore. I was new to the position, so I was like, oh, I'll go check this out and see what they're talking about, even though it was more geared towards the private lands for it. So when I went there, I met one of Ducks Unlimited's regional managers for doing habitat work in that. And kind of as David said earlier, it was a conversation with him. I just introduced myself, told him that I was new manager at Doe Creek, and we got to talking and gave them the problems I was having and how they could help us out. Prior to this, I probably had about a year of utilizing tools such as LiDAR, laser levels, field observations there. So I knew what the problems were at Doe Creek, but I just didn't have the funding sources to handle them all at once. And that's where he came in and said, well, we might be able to help you out with it. So he came out to the field. We did multiple field visits. We went over the kind of initial plan that I had in my mind, and that while he was looking into funding. So it turns out we were able to acquire a Chesapeake Wild grant that the Fish and Wildlife Services and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation had put out for $467,000 grant funding. And then our wetlands biologists, we have the migratory, the duck stamp for Virginia. So we were able to use about $200,000 in match for that, for this project. Once the funding sources were set in that, Ducks Unlimited then brought in their engineering team and utilized the information that I had to start putting together an actual engineered plan for the work that was going to get done with the funding sources we had to cut a little bit out of there just to meet the requirements for it. So here's a picture of part of their plan for one of the impoundments. We did this on 2 or 3 impoundments, more or less. So the areas in gray are areas that we were removing. I believe it was like up to 5 inches of fill from these areas that are higher in the impoundment that just never got flooded for it. And we stuck them around the darker gray on the outside. So those were all the borrow ditches on these impoundments here. So you can see based off of that how many linear feet. This impoundment is probably about 50 acres. So we're talking miles of this borrow ditch that was just holding water and not letting us put it over the acres that we needed for good duck habitat, shorebird habitat, being able to manage it for moist soil management there. And then also reshaping the dikes along there where muskrat damage and that had occurred. So in the end, with a few things, we were able to get the land leveling and the ditch fill about halfway of these ditches. So there is still a ditch around the outsides there. We installed 5 water control structures and 2 weirs. So the weirs are acting to stop the water from going back into these tax ditches and staying actually in the impoundments. We are filling up these impoundments both with rainwater, and we have 3 wells that we can supplement. And the water had to fill all the way back these tax ditches to the same elevation in the impoundments. So basically we were putting water in the tax ditches rather than putting them in our impoundments there. So the 2 weirs that we installed has stopped that from going back in the tax ditches and allows us to then keep the water that we're trying to keep in the impoundments. The third thing they were able to do is get the dike repair and reshaping of the dikes. So it was probably on a 1 to 2 slope when I first got there. With this project, we were able to reshape to a minimum of a 3 to 1 slope, which is going to help stop the muskrat damage. They won't have that shelf that they can borrow into and come up through the dike for it, and allow for the maintenance of these impoundments and that to be better managed for it. Other than that, if you have any other questions, we'll get that here in a minute for it. Or if you want to reach out to me, my work cell's there for it to even if you want to see the project, anything like that, feel free to give me a call and we can work out the details on that. So.
Joe, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I
Thank you.
I'm wondering if I'm missing any other questions in the chat. I don't think I see any. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask the panelists? Okay, here's one from Jen. For David Baird, what options are farmers showing interest in to deal with coastal migrations?
Only caught the second half of that, Kristen.
Oh, what options are farmers showing interest in with respect to dealing with coastal migration?
I don't have the details on the specific practices other than just the acres that they're interested in having future conversations on.
Okay. Thank you, David. Now for Sarah, the question is, what kinds of innovative cover cropping strategies are some of the farmers that you're working with interested in trying that are not covered by the traditional cover crop program?
So one farmer is doing, so one big thing is cover crops at non-traditional times of the year. So for example, one grain farmer is skipping a double crop of soybean and opting to plant a cover crop in the summer following wheat harvest and let that cover crop grow all the way to the following spring. Right now, the Maryland traditional program would not cover that because cover crops can't be planted prior to August 1st, and he's planting in July. But also other things like one farmer was interseeding a low-lying clover into wheat in certain areas of the field. And then after he harvested the wheat, the cover crop was already established. So that would not be covered on the traditional program. A pure legume, that's not covered on the traditional program. And sometimes there's a reason why farmers would want to plant a pure legume rather than including a winter cereal. And then a lot of the cover crops that other types of farmers would, like micro farmers or vegetable farmers would be interested in doing, like they have different windows that are outside of the traditional program. So.
Thank you. I have a question for Joe, actually. Let's say there was an area where tax ditches were not as well maintained, maybe in part because of sea level rise. They're not draining as much as they used to. If we were to look at that system, from your perspective, is there an opportunity to look and say, okay, well, where do we need this water? And where could we create habitat with it to basically incentivize improving that whole drainage system to provide that critical water resource to the impoundments like we're doing?
Yeah, so good question. So recently we just purchased 8,500 acres here on the Eastern Shore through a timber harvest company. And I'm
That's
actually
Maryland and Delaware, right?
they did theirs in the early 2000s, so we just got to it here
Okay.
in 2001 for it. But it's 8,500 acres, but it was roughly 54 different parcels that we're going to manage for some marsh migration, some for upland habitat and that. But all of them seem to have these ditches running through them or to them. So we're actually looking at some of these parcels to, instead of keeping the water inside these tax ditches and that, and taking up that volume of water that when the tides come up, start backflowing into more upland habitat areas and that, and reducing the capacity that these ditches can have. Putting them over top of our landscape there. So restoring the hydrology in that, where we can put it over multiple acres of land at an inch deep, or allow that water to run onto our properties rather than staying inside these ditches. So therefore we would have more water capacity that does not need to stay in the tax ditches themselves, but can be saturated through the landscape themselves. Some of the issues I've been running into, though, is when they would cut roads or stuff like that, or flooding your neighbors, things like that. But there is a way to use LiDAR and laser levels and where the water enters your property. Basically, instead of having a 4-foot deep ditch by 5 foot wide, you put a 2-inch swale at an acre wide or something like that could still take that same volume of water and put it over the landscape at a longer longer interval to go across the landscape rather than going straight out to the bays and the ditches and that, which will also stop saltwater intrusion from coming in these stack ditches and mixing with the fresh water. It's going to have to get up to that elevation to start saturating and going back into these ditches that we're seeing. So it won't be a tidal ditch in some of these tax ditches anymore by allowing it over the landscape at those lower elevation properties that we have.
Okay, that was really helpful. David, do you have anything to add to that? And Alex is specifically asking about that saltwater intrusion issue with the tax ditch system, and if there are strategies that can fight this challenge.
Yeah. I don't know about strategies related to saltwater intrusion, but one of the things that we're seeing here in Delaware that is an opportunity, and we're strategizing on how to capitalize on that, is just the changing landscape of the landowners here in Sussex County. We're seeing a lot more landowners who have purchased land in the last 10, 15, 20 years that are less interested in its traditional agricultural value, but are more interested in its recreational value. And with that aspect, they're bringing a completely different mindset to the table, where some of the wildlife habitat and conservation related activities are front and center compared to agricultural production being front and center. So that's kind of a change that we're having to deal with. And like I said, it's an opportunity for us here. And I think it opens up conversations to what Alex was alluding to in his comment.
Okay.
I don't know if you're seeing some of the same things in Virginia, Joe, or not.
Yeah, there's definitely an influx of more wildlife related, even for our upland forestry practices, in that we're seeing much more wildlife oriented landowners than there are for the agricultural. I don't know if that's the rising saltwater intrusion in these farmer fields are getting harder for the farmers to make money off the land, or the crops are less for it, but we are seeing that here as well. And I will say, so the tax ditch, for allowing that water over, here on the shore, I think we have 35 feet on the lower end of elevation gain for it. So when we get down to these properties that are adjacent to the bay there, we're looking, I think, so Doe Creek, for example, I think I have 8 foot of elevation rise from the top of my property to the bottom of my property there. So when these ditches, they dug 2 foot down, 4 foot down, all the way out to the bay there for it. So what I'm looking to do is kind of put a ditch plug in at the start of my properties and force that over top of the 1,000 acres, compared to staying in those ditches that are smaller, if that makes sense. Which in turn will help with some of that saltwater intrusion getting into these lower areas for it.
Let me just ask, Alec, you had your hand raised. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a strategy that's worth further development. We're losing over 1,000 acres a year to saltwater intrusion on the Delmarva. And, it's not just the tax ditches that are the vectors. There's lots of private ditches that are as well. And, I've been thinking about, can we use, some of these kind of reverse the drainage management stuff so that it's to keep water from flowing into an area instead of draining water out of an area. And, if the land can't be economically viable as farmland, oh my God, we're seeing an explosion of the value of it for recreation, to the extent that it's pricing out a lot of the farm activities even. So, it gives a way for landowners to keep land in some kind of productive use. So I think this is something we might think about developing further. And Joe, I'd like to have some conversations with you about this. Incidentally, I live on a different creek that's named Doe Creek, so go figure.
There is a lot of conversation in the chat right now. And let me just around this shift in interest from ag to recreation. One of the questions is, does that change your funding resources? And David, that might be a question for you, right? Like if a farm used to be farmed, now it's not really farmable, somebody has purchased it. What do the funding options change?
It could potentially, that's certainly an item that we have to consider, but what we're finding is usually the land that was used for agriculture is still being leased out, or, there's some remnant of agriculture still remaining. It's not a whole complete loss of ag production. So therefore they would maintain that eligibility.
And then there's kind of a discussion of like, what, is it public funding just for recreation, or that tie to water quality and habitat is really driving the taxpayer funded programs, right? Is the water quality habitat improvement.
Correct.
And Olivia,
Matt's comment there in the chat really seems to be right on the money with some of the things we're seeing.
And then I want to bring it back to Olivia's question about what NRCS practices are these wildlife-oriented landowners implementing?
But some of the wetland programs we're seeing, and then along with some of the just other general habitat. Joe had referred to the Black Duck Initiative that NRCS has had, various grouse programs, bobwhite quail. You can just think of some of those big NRCS national incentives and priorities that have been out there.
Good, thank you. Amy, this question is to you from Whitney Vong. She's wondering about, she's got, the Chesapeake Bay Trust has this lovely program for community gardens in some of the areas, and she's wondering if there are resources. And Sarah, you may be able to speak to this too on behalf of all your extension colleagues to support new gardeners who want to practice regenerative ag.
Yes, well, we certainly have a large percentage of small scale farmers amongst our the farmers that we work with. I don't have a particular handout for cover cropping for small scale, but I can probably find one to send to you, Whitney, if you'd like. But we do have a lot of workshops that are focusing on small scale farming. Coming up this year, we'll have one in March with University of Maryland Eastern Shore at their extension and research farm, focusing on healthy soils in micro farming. So I can share that information. The best way to keep in touch is to join our newsletter or follow the Million Acre Challenge on social media. Future Harvest also offers a farming fundamentals class, which begins later this month. It has a lot of resources that are helpful for community gardens and small scale farmers, including soil health and cover crop.
And Sarah, I was kind of joking about you speaking on behalf of all of your extension colleagues. If you know of anything, chime in.
Sure. Yeah, we do. Our Maryland Home and Garden Information Center has a fact sheet on cover crops for like gardens, so I could send that along. And yep, we have workshops and things as well across a variety of areas. And our beginning farmer class will start up in February, so I can send some info along.
Whitney, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that definitely did. Thank you so much. I'll definitely be in touch with both of you to get those resources.
Great. You guys, thank you so much for your amazing conservation leadership and for sharing your experiences with us here. We really appreciate it. Paula, I think we can turn it back to you now to wrap us up.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. So thanks to all the speakers and the facilitators today. Really good sessions. Before everybody jumps off, because I know that's what people are anxious to do and get on with their day, can I see a raise of virtual hands if you found inspiration through today's presentations or a potential partner for collaborations? I love to see some hands going up. That's awesome. So keep them coming. And thank you again for joining us this morning and rolling with the punches as we all moved online for a virtual session today. We'll be in touch over the next couple of days to share with you the presentation, some of the resources that we've talked about this morning. If any of the speakers want to share additional resources, please send them our way. And we will add that. The recording will be online at our website, Delmarva landandlitter.net. And again, I really encourage you all to check out the website and see what this phenomenal group of collaborative partners is doing around Delmarva to host events like this. So thank you. I just want to reiterate, I think it was Jake that said, go talk to funders. Funders are people too. So I loved that quote in there. Make sure you reach out, get some inspiration from them and get feedback as you develop these projects. So they are there for you to bounce ideas off of. Along with the resources that we'll be sending out will be a short evaluation form. So that will help us prepare for next year. So hopefully we'll be back in person again if we're moving forward with your support. So with that, I think that's all we have. I just want to thank you all again for showing up. Kristen, do you have anything else?
Nope. One other thing, I did promise some funders in the chat that we would send out the RFPs when they came out, specifically the Delaware River RFP and the NIFWIF RFPs that are coming out. So if we could share them to this whole list, that would be ideal.
That would be great. Yeah. So if you're not on the DLLC mailing list, I would also encourage you to do that through the website because we send out only really a quarterly newsletter. But as things come up like this, we will also push out through that mailing list. So it's really helpful to have everybody on the same mailing list.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you all for a great meeting today. We'll be in touch.